person was killed during an encounter with immigration enforcement officers.
Two state officials say the Secretary of Homeland Security told them that the person who died was not the intended target of the warrant.
Another day, another upsetting ice thing, and no one knows what's really going on. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, your home for independent, nonpartisan analysis on politics, media, internet culture, and more. And unfortunately, we've got another kind of somber story to talk about. There's been the latest in a series of shootings by ICE officers, this time in Maine, that did leave a man dead. The details are still emerging, and once again, I'll probably have a take on this that no one is satisfied with, and there might even be a piece of this we could all agree on, and we will get to all of that. But first, we're going to watch some local news reporting to catch up on the story and figure out what's going on, what we know and what we don't know. Then we're going to look at a statement from the Department of Homeland Security, the federal agency responsible for ICE, giving their side of the story. Then I'll give you my take on it all. Now let's watch that local reporting.
First at 7, new developments on a deadly shooting in Biddeford, Maine. A person was killed during an encounter with immigration enforcement officers. Good to have you with us. I'm Glenn Jones.
I'm JC Monahan. Two state officials say the Secretary of Homeland Security told them that the person who died was not the intended target of the warrant. NBC 10's Colton Bradford has been tracking this news. He joins us in the newsroom now with more. Colton?
Yeah, Glenn, JC, good evening. There's a lot of information here. We're learning more tonight about what led up to this deadly shooting. Biddeford police have confirmed that ICE agents were involved, and new tonight, actually just a few moments ago, the agency, ICE, is now releasing its first account of what happened. So this is a look at the scene from this morning. ICE agents say that they were conducting surveillance on the last known address of someone with a final order of removal. When they say they attempted to stop a vehicle, the agency says the driver of that vehicle tried to flee, and an officer fired his weapon after fearing for public safety. Now, two immigrant rights organizations have identified that man who was killed as a 26-year-old Colombian who they say was authorized to work here in the United States. Now, investigators have not confirmed his identity or those details. ICE says the shooting is under investigation, and tonight we can tell you that we've reached out to federal and local officials for more information. Now, witnesses are telling us they're still processing what they saw and what they heard this morning.
I heard a gunshot. I thought it was a backfire, and then I kept hearing them, and I thought it was a drive-by shooting. I get up and look out the window, and I see a small white car being corralled by two men trying to stop it from losing control around the intersection.
Also, just a few moments ago, Governor Janet Mills is reacting to the news tonight. She's calling the Maine governor, Janet Mills, is calling the shooting disturbing, and says that it's infuriating. She says it highlights what she describes as the reckless and haphazard way that immigration enforcement is being carried out, adding that this has to end.
So there you have it, a summary from a local news station about this story and about what's happened. And I honestly think this is objectively a heartbreaking incident. Obviously, this man's life was lost, and that's a tragedy. Apparently, his 3-year-old daughter, according to some of the early reporting, witnessed his death, and he, as well, it's being reported that he was not actually an illegal immigrant, though, of course, his death would be sad either way, but was not the correct target and was detained, they attempted to stop the vehicle while they were looking for someone else who was potentially an appropriate topic, somebody with a deportation order. But regardless, the unfortunate thing here is that we don't really know for sure what did or didn't happen because none of these ICE officers were wearing body cameras. And we will come back to that. But first, let's look at what DHS's account. What are they saying, right? Giving their side of the story. Because in the past, they have made different justifications for why a use of lethal force would be justified. Well, here's what DHS posted. On July 13th, 2026, at approximately 7 a.m. Eastern, ICE was conducting targeted surveillance on the last known address of an illegal alien with a final order of removal. An illegal alien departed the residence in a vehicle. ICE law enforcement attempted to conduct a vehicle stop. The vehicle attempted to flee the scene, and for fearing for public safety, an officer discharged his weapon. The driver of the vehicle was struck, and emergency services were immediately contacted. He passed away from his injuries. And now, this is a really astonishing statement made by the Department of Homeland Security. Because in past incidents, what we've had is a he said, where there's two different versions of the story. One, according to DHS, that describes a justified shooting, and then another, based on supporters of the person that was shot, some video testimony, witnesses' testimony, a debate over what did or didn't happen. And you have one version of the story that would constitute a justified law enforcement shooting, and another version of the story that would constitute not an unjustified and illegal use of lethal force by immigration officials. What is remarkable about this statement from the Department of Homeland Security is that it does not describe a justified use of lethal force. It describes an explicitly unjustified use of lethal force, shooting someone who's driving away, who is fleeing the scene. You are not allowed to do that. The only time law enforcement is allowed to use lethal force against someone is when they have a rational fear that they're in imminent danger or someone else is, not to stop a suspect fleeing the scene of a crime. And you can look at, for example, the DHS's own website with their guidelines says they may only use deadly force, quote, when the LEO has a reasonable belief that the subject of such force poses an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to the LEO or another person. Deadly force shall not be used solely to prevent the escape of a fleeing subject. So there you have it from their own policies about the use of force, that this is not allowed. And then in their own statement, what they're describing is explicitly the officer shooting because the guy's trying to get away, which you cannot do, right? Which is not in past statements, they have said, oh, well, the suspect attempted to weaponize his vehicle and run over the law enforcement in these past incidents, and therefore the law enforcement officer fired his weapon and used lethal force to protect himself and others. And then people dispute whether or not that's true. But at least in that case, it is correct and true that if you try to run over a law enforcement officer, they have the right to shoot you. I don't think most people really dispute that. In this case, according to DHS, they are not alleging that this guy tried to run over police or ICE officers. They're alleging that he tried to flee the scene within his vehicle, which I don't think you should do. If law enforcement officers are trying to pull you over, you should stop, for just as a matter of common sense. I understand that people panic and that the current situation is fraught. However, you should stop, but simply fleeing doesn't justify shooting someone. And all over Twitter and right-wing media, I do see people saying, he tried to run over an officer. He tried to run over an officer. Why wouldn't the Department of Homeland Security be alleging that? The actual spokespeople for ICE are not making that claim. And that's the claim every other time this has happened, where that was their story, they explicitly said so as their justification. Here, all DHS is saying is that the officer fired to protect public safety as the dude was driving away from them. That is, at face value, you're describing a crime. Shoot any law enforcement officer, whether it's a local officer or an immigration official, which is a federal law enforcement officer, shooting someone that's posing no direct threat to anyone is a crime. And at the very least, that officer would need to be reprimanded and removed from duty and possibly charged with some sort of criminal charge. Now, the part of the problem here is, like I mentioned, we don't have body cam footage. And that's absolutely insane and indefensible. We need to have body cam footage. Every single ICE officer in the field needs to be wearing a body cam as soon as possible. They have tried to enact this. I understand that the government shutdown and the partial freeze on ICE funding is delaying this stuff, but it needs to be a priority. Whatever they need to do to make it happen needs to happen. Because then we would have more information to reach final conclusions about this, and it wouldn't be such a he said. But in this case, I mean, even the DHS is not really disputing that they did something awful here. The whole situation is a mess. I really think we need to focus on getting those body cams rolled out, because that will also protect the officers in the instances where they are facing a legitimate threat of lethal force that they need to then discharge their weapons in a legitimate fashion. It will also protect the officers, which of course I want them to be safe as well. I don't want anyone to be in danger. But yikes, this is really getting ugly, some of these scenes. Now, of course, when you are trying to deport millions of people and arrest thousands of people, there are going to be incidents that go awry, but this is really tragic. And anytime we are putting, with law enforcement, we are putting trust in them as the public. And we are trusting them with the ability to use force on behalf of the state. And that must always be done in a way that is lawful, in a way that is restrained, and that in a way that is legal, and in a way that is a last resort. And when you have them potentially shooting someone driving away, that is absolutely unacceptable, if that's what really happened here. And so we do need a very thorough scrutiny of this. I'm astonished, honestly, by DHS's statement about it, by the way they're kind of just cavalierly admitting that the officer wasn't really in imminent fear for his life in their own statement. And understandably, people are outraged over this in Maine and across the country, because it's horrible to think about federal officers killing a father reportedly in front of his 3-year-old daughter, whether he was an illegal immigrant or authorized on a work visa, which is the latest reporting. I don't know for sure. Doesn't really matter. That's still a heartbreaking human story being done in an instance where that use of force is not justified or necessary. That's awful. And that's not something that, even if you support a secure border, which I do, even if you support mass deportations, which obviously millions of Americans do and did vote for, that's unacceptable. That is absolutely unacceptable. Now, at the same time, the fact that ICE is, in many ways, I think, botching their enforcement of immigration, and the fact that many of these officers are clearly behaving in ways that are not in keeping with their own policies, that is not a reason to rip up the book and abolish ICE and give up the entire project of deporting people or enforcing our immigration laws. And it certainly doesn't change the fact that we still should be rounding up and deporting people who are in the country illegally, who pose a threat to others or are criminals or are in any way harming our society that they're not even supposed to legally be authorized to be in. So here is the catch-22. People are understandably outraged about this shooting and upset about the loss of life and the alleged improper use of force by ICE officers in this case in Maine. And so they are protesting. But because, I don't know, it's a blue state and progressives and bleeding heart Democrats are just physiologically incapable of not being cringe as here's what they're chanting. Listen to this.
No ICE! No KKK, no fascist USA! No ICE! No KKK, no fascist USA! No ICE! No KKK, no fascist USA! No ICE! No KKK, no fascist.
Good grief. Like I said, guys, I am really disturbed by this shooting in Maine. I think ICE is in many ways needs to be reined in and is out of control, but to compare them to the KKK is ridiculous, which was a vigilante racist hate group. Like to say that it's fascist inherently, to want to get rid of ICE entirely. It's actually not fascist to have immigration laws and enforce them and try to deport people. It should be done in an orderly way. It should be done, following use of force policies and with the maximum regard for human life. And that's not clearly being done in all cases, and that's a huge problem that should be addressed. But once you start going on the no ICE, no, okay, so we're just gonna not deport murderers and rapists that are in the country illegally. Give me a break. That, you sound ridiculous. You look ridiculous. And it's not just them. It's literally activists are one thing, right? People on the street marching and protesting tend to be of the more extreme variety politically. But elected officials throughout the Democratic Party are rallying behind this idea of abolish ICE. And I'm saying that is not just on its merits a very dumb position. It's also politically cancerous outside of deep blue enclaves. So here is just as one example, though this really is a very widespread position among Democrats at this point. Mayor Zohran Mamdani wrote on X, "This morning in Biddeford, Maine, a 26-year-old man said goodbye to his wife and daughter and left for work. Moments later, he was dead, shot in the head by ICE agents, the second man ICE has killed in 6 days. ICE is killing our neighbors. ICE cannot be reformed. Abolish ICE." That tweet has over 3 million views. And I think it is such an asinine and ridiculous position and assertion, because think about it like this. If we had an issue with, and this has been an issue in the past, though it's a lot less common than people think, but bad police shootings, I'm talking about actual police, like local PDs, and they were shooting people inappropriately, they were using lethal force when it was not justified, and it was a problem that was getting out of hand, and there were some tragic incidents, a couple in the space of 1 week. The answer would be to hold the officers accountable for breaking rules and committing crimes, to institute reforms to the system, to the police. No reasonable person would think the solution would be to abolish the police entirely, because there's still an important, extremely important, and fundamental role they play in public safety that everybody understands who has a little bit of common sense left. So only, the crazy crazies ever really cheered for the defund the police thing. Yet when it's ICE, they seem to suddenly forget that there's a reason that even under Obama and Biden, ICE still existed and still was doing work to deport certain people, because it serves a very legitimate and important function. And there are untold thousands upon thousands of violent, dangerous criminals in the country illegally who actually, we should be apprehending. Now, I am not a proponent of what the MAGA position supports, which is mass deportation, get all, 10 million people out. I think it's very complicated and not practical and not necessarily the right solution. But anyone who denies that there's some need for federal immigration enforcement, that's kind of insane. Unless what you're saying is abolish ICE, but replace it with a different government agency doing the same thing, which is what some of them mean. But that's effectively not abolishing ICE. That's renaming it. So then why are you saying abolish ICE? And then if that's what you truly believe, then don't say abolish ICE, because people are going to think you mean just ending immigration enforcement, which in the case of the Zohran Mamdani types, I think that is what they mean. And that's crazy. So look, like I told you, my take on this, probably not going to make anyone happy, but I'm very concerned by what they're doing, what ICE officers are doing in some of these cases, and even their own side of the story is not adding up to me. And I really do believe they should be held accountable. I think we got to fix the body cam situation immediately, whatever needs to be done. Don't care how much it costs. That's for once, a good use of taxpayer money. But then also progressives need to really, really rein in this message, because you have a point here. And then you start ranting about the KKK and abolish all immigration enforcement, and then you lose sane people. I don't know, guys. This is a really sad story. I just wish this could have been avoided and this didn't have to play out like this. And I will be staying tuned. Obviously, we don't have the full facts and more information will come out. But in the meantime, guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you aren't yet. Do hit the like button, and please do consider becoming a channel member. If you want more of this kind of independent, somewhat sane, moderate, nonpartisan commentary, whether you always agree with me or you don't, that's fine. But the best business model on YouTube, political YouTube, is just to pander to one extreme. And then you'll make millions of dollars and get millions of subscribers. I'm genuinely trying to do something different and give honest, independent analysis. And that's not the best business model, but it does help when I have support from viewers like you who become channel members by hitting the join button or clicking the link in the description or pinned comment. And then as well, I also do videos reacting to member comments and questions. So if you have feedback or roasts or questions for me, become a channel member and then drop those in the comment section down below, and you may be featured in a future video. And with that, guys, we'll leave it there on this pretty sad story and be back with more real soon.